And we got that song in our head.
I'm singing to the world.
Good morning. Good morning.
Let the Spirit come in. Let it come on in.
Welcome, welcome. Oh, we need to reboot.
All right. Hopefully you're all coming on in. Welcome. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome, welcome.
Welcome to Duzie Live. This is our Duzie Live Good Grief on STERBs. It is so exciting to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are joining us live, welcome. Whoop, whoop. Those who are joining in the replay, then also welcome too.
Yeah. Last week we had a great time, and it's been really the topic of our conversation throughout the whole week with a lot of people, the whole area of good grief. What is good grief? I am excited today as we move past good grief into looking what are the things that maybe have planted some things in our life that we need to uproot as we move forward. So welcome everyone. When you come into the space, when you come into the room, please put your name down there and also put in there where you're coming from. We'd love to see where you're coming from this morning. And welcome, Kim.
Hello.
That's good. So who we have coming in here this morning? Let's see.
We have David Taylor. Looks like you're the early adapter. Way to be here. Checking in from the UK. And Megan, welcome in. From the UK, we've got Nicole coming from the Philippines. Awesome. Nicole, what part of the Philippines? We'd love to know. Direne, welcome back in. You're from Cebu area. Welcome in. Awesome. Katie from France. Whoop, whoop. We've got you back in with us again. Megan says, hi, Kim.
Hello.
Hannah, oops, where did I miss you? Hannah Skirton from England. Ellie from the UK. Ellie, whoop, whoop. Evelyn from Texas. I love your Bible study pictures you've been putting out.
Stephen, hello, Stephen.
Stephen, you made it. Nice. Julia from Germany, currently on the Logos Hope in the Caribbean. Welcome in. That's awesome. And Megan wants to know how's the internet on the ship, Julia, so you'll have to let her know about that. And Rob, Dr. Rob.
So good.
Welcome in. Thank you for joining us. Awesome to have you all.
We are really excited about coming in today. Every morning before Duzie Live, I do a few things. I mean, first of all, I take my puppy for a walk, which was a delight this morning. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, which is good. But I choose a song normally for the morning that I just let repeat. And this morning, the song that came to me was a song called Daybreak. And originally, it was sang by a guy called Barry Manilow. And then one of the Gaithers used to sing it. I remember him singing it in our church. And it was like this song that used to take me places. I want to give you just a little bit of the lyrics because I think for me, it set the stage to get ready for where we're going this morning. It says this, and think about the whole idea of the outbreak and our years before the outbreak, and now it's daybreak. It says, I'm singing to the world. It's time to let the Spirit come in. Let it come on in. I'm singing to the world. Everybody's caught in a spin. And isn't that true? Look at where we've been. We've been running around year after year, blinded with pride, blinded with fear. But it's daybreak. If you want to believe, it can be daybreak. Ain't no time to grieve and no time to get stuck in grief. Say it's daybreak if you only believe and let it shine, shine, shine all around the world. I'm singing to the world. What's the point of putting it down? There's so much love to share. I'm singing to the world. Don't you see? It all comes around. The feelings are everywhere. And we're going to be dealing with those feelings today because we've been closing our eyes day after day, covered in clouds, losing our way, but it's daybreak. And I think as we examine today the STERBs, we want to not just look at them, but move past those clouds and fog into the daybreak of for us and for others.
A few more of you have jumped in. Thank you. There's Illy coming in from the Netherlands. Welcome in. Tim and Joni Thomas, my parents from Florida. Whoop, whoop.
All right.
Cheryl Potter, Dan's parents from Michigan. Richard Houston from Hamburg, Germany. Welcome in. And those of you who haven't chatted, that's okay. It's your choice whether you want to or not. Let me just tell you where we're going today.
Let me just say one thing for it. On the side, you can also see a little dot. If you have a question you really, throughout the whole program, you want to be answered, try to hit that dot. We have a lot of people on today. We may not get to everything, but if there's a red dot on the side there, we're going to get to that question specifically because we know it's a question.
Yes.
Thanks.
Awesome. So this is where we're going. Today is Good Grief, Part 2 with Kim Kukura. Whoop, whoop. We've got her with us. And I want to thank you so much for showing up. First of all, for showing up for yourself, to allow yourself to process this whole grief. But I know there's many of you who are here also to show up for others. You are helpers, and you are people that really want to input into others. So thank you for showing up, both for yourself and for others. So we're going to talk more about grief. Kim's going to take us through. We're going to talk about STERBs. So STERBs are short-term energy relieving behaviors. We're going to identify what they are and talk about your particular emotions connected to that and what to do with those emotions, how to express them. So Kim's going to take us through some of her amazing training, unpack it for us in the Duzie Live version, and then stay tuned. About at the 60-minute marks, we're going to go into what we call the backstage. And in the backstage, we're going into 10 ways to cope with isolation. So Kim, as we're just getting started, before you get started into the meat of everything, what are some of your just your thoughts as you've been processing this? You've been like soaking in it for weeks, but tell us just like a little paragraph or so of what you're thinking of when you're thinking of.
Well, before you do that, while you're doing that, I would like other people also to go into the chat. And if you were here last week, just write down some of your takeaways from last week, because we want to hear what Kim has to say here. Then we want to go to some of your takeaways as we move forward. So Kim, let's hear from you first.
Sure. As I was thinking about Good Grief Part 2 and STERBs and how we are meant to be fully alive and we're meant to be a living hope to the world as believers, what was really striking me is not just how we accumulate the losses like stones in our backpack and it gets heavier and heavier, that as we talk about STERBs today and these ways that we deal with our emotional energy, you'll hear the analogy of a hamster wheel. Like you're just spinning and spinning, but getting really nowhere. And so it just struck me, I even wrote it down, that we're now on this hamster wheel with a heavy backpack. Like we're just kind of in this activity and just getting more and more weighted down, and just no wonder that we aren't feeling fully alive. So my hope and my heart for people is to identify like where they're spinning and begin to become aware of that and begin to become aware of what they're carrying and help you not take on any more, and then give you connections where you can start to unpack that backpack and step off that wheel.
Oh, that's really good. I mean, it goes back again for me in the song that we're caught in this spin and we need to get off of that and get moving forward. We've had a few comments about people can only see us in a very small window. If you see two large pictures side by side, only two little screens. Okay. I'm not sure why that is. We may have to reboot because that happened to us once last week as well.
Yeah.
So should we reboot it?
Well, I think let's see when she goes to the screens.
Okay.
Yeah, when she goes to her slides. So we've got a couple takeaways. My takeaway in particular is those two conflicting emotions. When I'm having two that are conflicting, like having a struggle, like, no, I'm feeling sad. No, I should be happy. Then I'm in grief. And then I should be really listening to what's going on here. So that's my takeaway. And I see that Megan was talking about something that she posted on the Fully Alive Facebook page. And by the way, I want to continue to invite you into the Fully Alive Revolution Facebook page. We now have 233 people in the group, which is great. We'd love to continue to have a lot more interaction. So thank you, Megan, for being a regular poster. And we also have Katie, who's also regularly posting, and she's with us here as well. So thank you so much for that. And Megan posted a video of Nadia on the Facebook page. And one of the things she talks about was how people were coping with lockdown. And she talked about someone who had been a POW, prisoner of war. And he was asked who were the people who struggled most with being on lockdown. They were the people who struggled the most were the optimists and had hope. All of that to say, how do you deal with grief and hope in the light of that? Yeah. So they were the ones who were positive and who had hope. Is that right? And they struggled the most.
Yeah, well, they kept thinking,
I didn't watch it yet. I saw
several people are talking about, not just her, but they're talking about the whole idea of if we have too much hope, then it may take us into a spiral down very quickly. And that is one story. There's also stories that I've heard from the other side that people in the concentration camps during World War II, it was only those people who could see, I'm going to live for tomorrow. I'm going to live for tomorrow. So in my opinion, as I've looked at it, there are people who were pessimists and didn't make it through. There were optimists that didn't make. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that it's actually possible to use hope as a STERB. If you are using hope as a way to avoid looking at what's really happening in front of you, then it has become an energy relieving behavior. However, if you are actually looking at what's happening around you and you acknowledge this is a horrible situation, I might be in it for a long time. However, I know that there's a good God that's going to get me through it, that is going to empower me through this, then that's true hope.
Good. Thanks, Kim.
Yeah.
Great. So Megan says, my takeaway from last week was how brilliant it was. True. That's awesome. And then Elma's just popped in, and greetings from the Philippines. Thank you for joining us from the other side of the world. Direne says, takeaway from last week, we were taught to accumulate things, and we grieve when we lose things in life. Thank you, Kim and Susie. And that picture, that was really good for me. We're taught how to add, but we're not taught how to take away. Thank you, Direne, for that callback to that. Dr. Rob says, my takeaway, my responsibility is to take small steps to make correct choices that lead toward hope and recovery. That's awesome. And Direne also said that it's okay to grieve, then hope towards completion.
Nice.
Yeah. And Megan, thanks you, Kim, for just your perspective on that. Now, I know that Kim sometimes has her internet allows her to come and go, so we'll have her when we have her. And I thank you for just keep making sounds, Kim. Then we know you're still there, and I'm didn't here. Lose you.
I'm here.
Yeah, awesome. So we're just wondering, do you see 2 large screens now? I think we potentially have it. And I think we're ready, Kim, if you are, to dive into some of the content. Yeah. Now, we also just want to remind you that there is a time in the midst of the content when you're going to hear this. And can anybody remember what that means? What does that mean? It means that it's time for a poll. So then we're going to pop a poll up. And then in response to whatever you say on the poll, we're gonna take it from there, aren't we, Kim? We love that. And so there's a couple times when it's a poll. One of them is going to be today a poll where you choose one of the items and you're going to choose your best. And one of the times it's going to be that you just type something in. So hang on and wait for that. That is coming soon.
Someone asked us last week, what is it that we're actually looking at when we're talking about this? And I snapped a picture just before we started today, because if you ask a question, I'm going to try to help you.
Yes.
When you look at your screen, you see us. When we look, this was taken just before, but let me show you there. That's what we see. We see 2 lights and the screen. And and we never knew where to look. So now we have this. If you see that,
Thank you, Dan.
Right there's a little eyeball that I put there, just so that we can actually know exactly where to look. So that's what we're looking at as you're looking at us.
All right. So Kim, take it away. We're just
All
gonna
right.
let you go there to the slides.
Okay.
And we're gonna pop off, but we are here vocally.
Well, this was our last week's first slide. Good grief. This was from last week. So it's the STERBs 2020.
Oh, do I have the wrong one? Well, thank you for noticing. That's
okay.
The wrong one.
That's okay. But
yes, here we go.
So while we bring up this one, so STERBs, Good Grief Part 2, here we are to kind of dive a little deeper into what we might be doing with the emotional energy we have associated with our losses. So we're going to talk about the who, what, when, where, and why. But I wanted to start with a short video to kind of recap where we went last week. So I'm going to try and share my screen and share this short video. So let's go. Let's see here. All right.
Kim is trying this new technology. Go, Kim. Thank you for doing that.
Allow. Let's see. This one.
Megan, love how you like the pull sound. It makes you think of ice cream in the ice cream truck.
Death of Son, 1977.
Can you all hear?
We can hear, but we can't see it.
Years had made the assumption, because loss was such a common occurrence, that there would be people
How about now?
trained to know how to help.
We can only hear it.
The is that most of the help offered in nature.
Katie, very interesting. Is it intentional that STERB is the German verb for dying? I did not know that, but it's an acronym, short-term energy relieving behaviors. Yep. Very interesting that it in German means dying.
Almost no one had ever heard the word.
Well, I'm not able to share my screen right now, but I was excited for you all to see and hear the authors of the Grief Recovery Handbook actually share the origins of the Grief Recovery Institute and all of the great tools they've put out for grievers. However, it's just not working out, which is fine. Katie, when I was on the ship the last time, I did have someone from Germany in my grief recovery group, and they shared that STERB meant death. And I thought, wow, what an amazing just connection there, because these things can make us less alive. So thanks for sharing that and reminding me of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shall we carry on?
Yeah, let's go on through.
So here's the link. This is the one you were trying to show us. Is that right? So maybe if somebody can see that, you can just type that right into the space, into our comment there, and we'll have that for everybody.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You need to click on that. Is somebody able to type that in for us real quick? Those of you who are great at typing in.
Yeah, it's just for those of you who weren't here last week. It's a great clip just to kind of introduce you to this concept of grief recovery, and even for folks who were here last week, just a good recap.
Yeah, and again, for those of you who were not here and you want to hear what was said last week, which was real foundational for good grief, if you go to Duzie Potter YouTube, the Duzie Live is up, both the morning and the afternoon one, so you can choose which one. Thank you, Megan, for typing that in.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's move forward then. All right, so we're going to talk about the who of STERBs. And as we learned last week, it's grievers who have emotional energy in response to the mixed emotions after a loss, a tangible or an intangible loss. The what are STERBs? These short-term energy relief or energy relieving behaviors, which can lead to other losses. The when it's happening, becoming aware. And the where are we headed with all of this? So we'll talk a little bit more about completion. And then the why, beginning to think about meaning in our grieving, in our good grief. So here I had another quick link, again, to John James, the author, one of the co-authors of the Grief Recovery Handbook. He was actually one of my trainers when I was certified. And he talks here about the sixth myth, keep busy. If you remember that from last week, it was one of the intellectual solutions that we often give to people who need emotional first aid. And this keep busy is a way of just hoping time will heal wounds. Let time pass, we'll keep busy. And what often people do in this keep busy is turn to STERBs. So that's why this video is entitled, What Does Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll Have to Do with Grief? Just to sort of lead us into this idea of STERBs. Okay. So the first part of what is emotions. And you
what? Emotions.
What? You see the word motion in the word emotion. So the feeling is kind of what we feel in our body, and then the emotion is kind of the energy that comes out with that. And so every loss, whether it's a tangible loss or an intangible loss, which is like a change or a stoppage of a familiar pattern or behavior, there's energy that needs to be expressed that comes with that. This is how we are designed. It's normal. So often we are given something, though, to help us feel better. And I've got the picture of the cookie there. That was what was offered to me as a child. If I were crying or disappointed, that was our family's go-to with sugar. So here's a cookie, you'll feel better. Well, actually, it just makes us feel different. It doesn't do anything to complete whatever I felt that I lost. So it doesn't help us discover the source of the emotional energy. So it gives us just a short-term relief. So then we have this illusion of feeling better. And we may begin some unhealthy patterns of behavior of just having to repeat things to have the short-term relief without ever getting relief from the emotional pain or dealing with the unfinished business. So the feelings are just still buried in our heart.
So emotions are so powerful in this whole situation of grief.
Yes, yes. And we'll talk about, here we have a list of some potential STERB activities that if they're done to avoid or cover feelings, they can have a negative impact on grievers in many ways. It could be that it's pressing down the feelings. It could be it becomes a pattern, a hamster wheel pattern of behavior. It could be that it leads to secondary losses. We know personally with my sugar, I shared this last time, I now have high cholesterol. And we can think about often people who turn to alcohol end up losing jobs, family, just many losses that come after the use of alcohol as a STERB. So, and I say this, and I have this picture here of the iceberg just as a reminder of what you see on the surface isn't always what's happening underneath the surface. We're seeing on the surface above the water on the iceberg people who might be drunk or isolated, or people we would call a sinner or promiscuous, just a mess, a junkie, a liar, whatever external behavior you see, under the surface, there's grief. And they're listing fear, a broken home, abuse. They have grief as one of the under the surface words, but everything they've listed under the surface is grief or losses of some kind that would lead to grief. So I just say this as not to excuse behavior, but just for us, especially us as helpers, to have compassion, not to enable others, but to have compassion when we see these behaviors and things above the surface, to have compassion with others and to have compassion with ourselves as we start to look at this. So some common things or activities we may turn to. I've got them listed here. Food, like I said, that's one of my biggies. Alcohol, drugs, anger. Sometimes people just decide the way I'm going to express my energy is through anger, and that is the only way I can get it out. Control, humor, exercise, fantasy, isolation. Sometimes I'm going to just be by myself. I'm not too much of a burden for others, so it's just easier to just go be by myself. To sleep. Some people have used sex, shopping, workaholism. Oh, and religious activity. I shared that last time as well. When I was having some personal pain, I just threw myself into church work. And I did do a lot of good, but it wasn't completing the pain that was in my heart.
Kim, so these red words that we have listed are what's called STERBs, right?
Right. These are examples, and people may think of many other examples. These are just really to start jogging your thinking toward what could be going on as you observe your own life and others.
Right. So these are examples of short-term energy relieving behaviors.
That's right.
And it is time.
Poll time.
So you see that list there, and we're going to put up the poll. And in this poll, it is actually that list of those red words. Which of those would be your STERBs? What do you go to when you're having all this conflicting emotional energy? You're potentially in grief, but you have short-term energy relieving behaviors. We would love to see what you say. And of course, this is anonymous, so we can't see who did what. So please vote honestly. And meanwhile, and while we're waiting, Rob has a question. What is the difference between something being a STERB and productive recovery progress, like work, sleep, exercise, hobby, things that bring joy? So what's the difference between the STERBs and these activities or behaviors that are actually good for us? Can you speak about that while we're taking our poll?
Great question. Yes. So when we are choosing to do an activity because we do enjoy it, it's something that brings us joy, it is something that we are blessed by, or we can bless others by, or it's something that is a choice for our health, such as going to the gym each day, then you're engaging in really healthy behavior. However, if this is something that you cannot be okay without, or if it's something that you find yourself doing, like all of a sudden I find myself with a bag of chips in my hand and I didn't realize I had even reached for it. Or there was a time in my life, if I didn't get to play volleyball, I was a very angry individual. So it is truly like, what's the fruit of it? And what's the intention behind it? Did you get to make a choice, or was it something you just automatically went to? Those are just some ways to distinguish. I'm sure there are more, but that's what comes to mind.
And Katie has an amazing question. Thank you, Katie. Why can we only vote for one? Because probably most of us have multiples.
Yeah.
And if you would say you have multiples, do like Megan did. She wrote them in. Food, fantasy, and sleep.
Yeah.
What is our polls showing us right now? We are at 30%, that's our highest, of fantasy, movies, TV, books, video games.
Yeah.
That was 30%. 23% was food. And let me see. And then we also had down lower, but lower ones, 7%, sex, shopping, religious activity, and alcohol, drugs.
Yeah.
So it looks like we are exhibiting some of these behaviors.
Yeah.
Oh, we just got a little bit less for fantasy and a little bit more for food. I don't have Dan doing the horse race energy here. Dun, 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 dun. And then we had to put other in there because this is not the only list. Isn't that right, Kim? There are many, many more. These are just some examples of that. So thank you so much for voting.
Yeah.
So it looks like, Kim, we have fantasy, and looking here at my picture. So, okay, you've got them there. So we've got fantasy was the highest, and then food was runner up. Do you want to talk a little bit about those two?
Sure. So fantasy is a great place to escape everything, isn't it? I know I have participated in that. I've got Netflix, and there's some great shows out there that at the end of a stressful day, and I'll actually talk about that a little bit more later. It's easy to come home and just get lost in that. And there's really nothing wrong with watching, reading fantasy. It's just truly making sure that you've had a place to express out any potential emotion that you need to, and you're not using it as a way to escape or avoid, so that emotion, that grief, gets pressed down.
Yeah, Direne says travel. Many of us are not able to do that. We're not able to travel. Yeah.
Well, that is another thing. So some of us, what I've learned on the ship is, we all have STERBs. We're human beings. We have emotional energy and haven't been taught what to do with it. So what we have at home to relieve our emotional energy, we come somewhere like the mission field, or to, like, for example, I was on the Lagos Hope, and we don't have those means available to us anymore, and we really struggle emotionally. And so I can imagine during the pandemic, maybe things that we would normally have at our disposal are not available. And so it might be even adding to the emotional stress that we're experiencing as we move through this kind of season of life.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So we've identified our STERBs. Shall we carry on, Kim?
Just one more comment about food. So
go for it.
So I actually have a history of having an eating disorder when I was in high school and in college. And food for me, first of all, was a sedative. It was a way to calm me down. And then there was, sorry if this is too much information, but like a purging behavior, sometimes through exercise or through actual purging, that was like the expressing out behavior and just helping me feel like everything was out. Another activity that I've heard kind of does is if you encounter someone who cuts on themselves, for them it feels like they are expressing out their emotional energy. They haven't been able to do that. And maybe there's trauma that it's trapped in their brain somewhere, so they may not even have the words. So for them, it feels like they're expressing their emotional energy through those cuts. So that is, again, just to kind of give you some background and some compassion for that behavior.
And some of those, particularly that you're talking about, the eating disorders and the self-destruction, are many times just a call for control, aren't they, Kim? So many times they don't have control of their situation, and that is what they can have control of.
Right. And that's an intangible loss, a loss of control, and there is emotional energy that comes with that. And so yes, these control type STERBs would come into play. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe, Kim, you can just say a little bit more, because as I'm thinking about it, STERBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors. So when we have these emotions going on, it is energy, and we have to do something with that energy. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. So it's much better to have some options that you can choose from, whether it's to go for a run, not like what we were talking before with Rob. It's not being driven to go for a run, but to choose, I've got a lot of energy right now. I'm either joyful or I'm sad or I'm frustrated. I'm going to choose to go for a run and express that energy that way.
So we have to have plans of what to do with our energy.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Megan says, Kim, I appreciate your honesty. It makes what you're talking about, grief, even more poignant, because you are talking from the voice of experience.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Let's carry on, shall we?
Yes. So what's the when of STERBs? It's becoming aware of when we're doing this. And I have placed, again, a personal picture up there in the right-hand corner of my spot on the couch. And I don't know if you all have seen a show called The Big Bang Theory, but there's a character there, Sheldon, who has his spot on the couch. And it's definitely a STERB for him as I watched that show. But I had a lot of transition in the last year myself, not being able to go back to the Lagos Hope last year, just due to our country's government shutdown, and then going back to work full-time in a psychiatric hospital. It wasn't the mission field that I wanted to be in, and I had very mixed feelings about that. So I began to become aware that I had developed my own spot on the couch. As you see that picture there, you see that my pillow, my blanket, my remote control. And there often would be, in addition to that, a glass of wine and something salty, then something sweet, then something salty, and so on. But thankfully, I do have some supports built into my life, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And what I had been keeping secret, not even intentionally, once I spoke it out to someone else, I was able to then even become more aware of when I was going to my spot, just to avoid the stress of the day or my mixed emotions about even being there. So in becoming aware, we want to begin to be aware of what we reach for when experiencing mixed emotions, and start to make a list. Download it from your mind onto a piece of paper. And then know this may feel fun. It might be an adventure for you. It may feel painful and awkward for you. But let me just say, doing these things does not mean there's something wrong with you. It means you're a human being that has emotional energy, and you have to do something with it. And now you're just going to start becoming aware of what you're doing with it.
Kim, I love how what you're doing is talking about this grief, these behaviors, this energy, and what we do with them. And it's helping us normalize, so we're not also freaking out about when we're having these experiences. You're giving us tools, and not a screwdriver to paint with, but a paintbrush to paint with. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, these are often learned behaviors. And I was saying to Dan and Susie as we began today that these impact generations. This is the bigger picture. As we've learned often these behaviors. I learned the eating from my mother. So it's very possible you learned your STERB behavior from those before you. And part of the work that we do in grief recovery is forgiving those that we've learned these from. But just to be aware, these are caught. By the time we're 3, we're catching the way to do this, to be fine and do something else with our emotional energy. We want to become aware of things we may be doing unconsciously. So this is a very intentional process, because in order to change habits, we have to become aware of them. All right. Now I want to talk about a really special time where you might experience a lot of emotional energy, and these are times you might really be STERBing, and it would be normal. It's celebrations and anniversary dates, and I have a feeling during the pandemic we've all missed opportunities to celebrate together. So if we've had someone die or a broken relationship, or just during the pandemic when we can't get together, because we've established many familiar habits and traditions with our loved ones, significant dates may feel sad when we can't be together.
Sure.
This is normal. You can make preparations when you know a date's coming up, because anniversary dates, we know when they're coming. You can make preparations for these dates, so you're not alone. To do something special in commemoration or just something that's significant to you.
Kim, I'm going to jump in here. Ellie made a great comment. Thank you, Ellie. One of the hardest things for me was when I was in my lowest times. It was knowing that I needed to make a conscious choice to either go and revel and curl up into my sadness or make a stand and actively try to do something that will help me feel happier. It's taken me years. I'm still not there. Yes, we are all a beautiful work in progress.
Yeah.
And her second part is what you just said about these celebrations and anniversary dates. It's making that conscious choice that is both the hardest part, but the most beneficial. Yeah. So we can do hard things. And when we're aware of what we need to do and we do it, what a benefit.
Yeah. Sometimes the first step is saying it out loud to someone else that hey, I've realized I've been doing this. And just, again, bringing it from the dark into the light without even ever changing your behavior, but just saying it out is a very powerful thing.
To a person with a big heart and two amazing listening ears.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Michaela says, generational habits. So true. Love the part of forgiving our parents or those we learned them from. Great insight. Thank you, Michaela.
Yes, thank you. Okay. All right, so here's where we are. We can't overcome grief by going over it or under it or around it or hamster wheeling around it. We can't STERB over it or under it or around it. We must go through it. So as we're going through it, and yes, it takes time. Each griever is unique and different. And I want to just say right here, even if you had siblings who lost the same parent, each of those siblings had a unique and different relationship to that parent. So their grief is going to be unique and different. We don't expect everyone to grieve the same, for the process to take the same time. We just really want to honor and respect each person's grief experience. Okay. So where are we headed as we move through grief? We're moving to this place called completion. Yes, completion.
Love this.
Yes. So it means, this word completion means you've discovered and communicated what was unfinished for you in all aspects of a relationship or an event that you've remembered up to this time. So that means you've got someone who can be a heart with ears for you. And as things happen, you can express out to them, I wish I had been able to say this, and say it. I wish this had been different, and say it. To a person to whom you know you will have been heard. That's why I've got, on the little figures there, they've got headsets where they're really hearing each other. And I personally, for this one, I do have someone who is a peer coach. It's an old friend of mine. We get together intentionally every 2 weeks. We each have a half an hour to express the goals we're working on, but as well as what's on our hearts. And the first half hour, let's say, is mine this week, and then she gets the second half hour for me to hear her. Then the next week, she goes first, and I listen, and then it's my turn. So we each have that intentional designated time where we know we're going to be heard. And we can just communicate whatever's unfinished with whatever's going on in our lives during that time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So completion does not mean that you'll never feel sad again, because sad is the normal emotion in the range of emotions. It does allow you, though, to return to a full range of emotions. So if we can get complete in our unfinished business after a loss, we won't remain trapped, kind of like that POW in our sadness, but we're released to have the full range of emotions that we're designed to have. And that also means you don't have to go over the same things again and again. And that's like that picture of the hamster wheel. Because often when we have unfinished business, it's that stuff that we just replay in our minds over and over and over. So
Yeah, that's good. Kim, I just want to jump in here. I think this completion, from what I hear you saying, this has been a new concept for me. When I think of grief, I don't think of completion. And last week and this week, you've helped me understand this in a new way. And it means you've discovered and communicate what was unfinished for you and up until this point. So you can have a completion up till now, and you might not be completely completed. Is that right?
Yeah. So for instance, my mother died in 2015, and I was able to do the work with another grief recovery specialist to get complete in that relationship. Someone who'd been trained like I am to work through the steps of recovery. And then Ken and I went to the mission field, and that would have made her so proud to know that her daughter had become a missionary. And so that was something that I had to say out loud to someone else. You know, Mom, I wish that you were here to see me go to the mission field. I know you'd be so proud. And I so wish that you were here to see this. Okay, bye, Mom. It was kind of like a little phone call in the presence of someone else to be able to express what I wish was different.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing that says we can't continue to communicate these things out of our heart to someone and just tell it goodbye as if it were a telephone conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you said you could say it to people, but some of us don't have someone. And you've also talked about writing it down. Yet another reason why we should journal or have a piece of paper to put it out there so you take it from the inside out. And I also love those last 2 points on this particular slide, because many times we get what we call stuck. We get stuck in that grief, and we're very limited. And the picture for me when I was experiencing grief, things that I lost when I left the ship and I was transitioning back into the real world off of the ship almost a year ago, I had very limited range of emotions, and I also had limited perspective. My story was so small when the reality was my real story was larger, and I knew I was processing through and releasing and coming towards and having completion like you're describing it here, because I did have more emotions and I had more than one stuck story. Wow. And I think that's a very important piece, what you're talking about. When we find ourselves limited, or, you know, we're like in this space and we're not seeing full range like we normally would, and we're not feeling full range and being courageous to go into that full range of emotions that we have, then this is probably just yet another signal that we're experiencing grief, or we're having some STERBs, or we're getting stuck in a place. So I think that's very powerful what you're talking about here in completion.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
From your story.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good, what you're saying is so true. And you're giving us some clues to know, hey, we might be in this space and we need a wider range, and we need those people and that these processes to help us do that.
Yeah.
And Megan asks about the hamster wheel. How do we break through? Because sometimes when we're feeling in that stuck place, that little hamster wheel is really safe for us. How do we work out and get out of that space?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about here, that it feels safe, it feels better, but it's really not. So it's doing exactly what you're saying now, acknowledging this is where I am and this is how it feels, and then being willing to be open to, but maybe this really isn't safe. Maybe this is avoiding being fully alive, and just being willing at the beginning to just be willing to explore that, and to just to be aware of it. It just starts there. It starts there. And then if you feel like you would want to work with a grief recovery specialist, someone who is trained to walk through the very detailed steps of grief recovery, the Grief Recovery Institute at the griefrecoverymethod.com has actual people in every continent, in most countries, who are available to do that work.
Griefrecovery.com. I think one more piece that was an awareness for me in last August, Dan and I were telling stories, but we were telling the same stuck story. And we sat with people we hadn't seen for a while. And then afterwards we were taking a walk and we said, do you notice that we only have one story? I was stuck on one piece of the story. Dan was stuck on a different piece of the story. And every time we shared, we were there. And we had, as we were walking, we were talking to one another and we were praying through it. And we said, we have more pieces of the story. Let's tell the bigger story. And it was a conscious decision to be out of the hamster wheel and to tell the bigger story. And as we began to tell the bigger story in community, and I was reading a book at that time, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder and how it affects the body. And the two main helps that it was talking about, which I was trying to put into practice, was community, being with other people, what you're telling us to do. And the second piece is story, telling story. And it does not even have to be the story of the stuck. It can be any story. And maybe that's why fantasy movie stories are helpful for us, because of the story piece of it. Yeah. Story engages us as human beings. So I just find that really very fascinating, putting that piece of what I've learned together with what you're talking here about STERBs and completion and good grief.
Yeah. And if people do choose to go through the action steps of grief recovery, you'll see it's all about story. Yeah.
So true. Thanks. The chat's humming. Keep it going. Kim, take us further.
All right. So some more clues. We have some more clues, Susie.
Yay, I love it.
Completion. Am I there yet? So some clues that you might have not be complete about a loss of a person or of a situation or a familiar pattern is, do you refuse to talk about it? Is it something you just is off limits to talk about? Do you avoid thinking about a particular loved one because good memories turn painful, or an event because good memories turn painful? Do you avoid places or events that remind you of someone who died? And my first husband was a police officer. Every time I saw a police car, I just didn't even want it. I just wanted to look away. It just was painful reminder of the ending of that marriage. I'm okay with them now, though. I am complete with police cars. Do you only talk about a person's positives, refusing to admit they might have had negative qualities too? This is a strategy we kind of innately use to feel fine. If we can just focus on the good things about someone, then we can just feel like we're fine. Then do you only talk about their negative qualities? That's another way. Sometimes there's been someone who has been particularly awful in our lives, and we may have the mixed feelings of wishing they'd been, let's say, a better parent, but we're thankful they gave us life, but they just weren't a good person to us. We wish they'd been different or better. But we tend to focus on only their negative qualities because it just helps us feel like we're healed. I can just focus on that and not even look at the whole person. Do we keep the same exact routines when the person was still with us or alive because we're afraid we'll forget them? And I just want you to know that your memories will stay with you. Your memories, no one can take those away from you. Your memories are part of your heart and your mind. Do you avoid getting close to people? Because unresolved grief is usually at the root of fear about any new relationship. So if we're incomplete, we just might not feel safe starting something new. But I think what I've written here at the bottom of this slide is very important. It's enough to start by saying, I may be incomplete with whatever it is. That is really, again, bringing it into the light. That's just a very powerful thing to do.
Yeah, good. Well, it's poll time.
Oh,
Here
all
we
right.
go. So Kim has completion. Am I there yet? Just wondering which of these you want to talk more about, or maybe something that you can very much relate to. So go ahead and make the poll right there, and then we can probably carry on a little bit further with that. Is that right, Kim?
Yes.
While you're taking the poll, I found it very interesting in this list. I was just listening with my ears and not exactly the words, but I found there was an awareness, clues like you were talking about. If you're avoiding or only, were two pieces of what you put there. You are avoiding or you're only. And again, this is the picture of a partial fullness. So you're limited. You have a small hamster wheel portion, if we're going to use that illustration, instead of having the fullness of what you can talk about, the fullness of where you can go and who you can be with, and only negatives or only positives. We're missing out on the fullness of.
Yeah, that's great. Yes. Wow. That's right. That's right. We're making ourselves the POW.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're locking ourselves up. Well, here we go. It looks like 70%. Oh, it just changed. Avoid
63%.
Yeah, 63. Avoid getting close to people or new relationships. And then some of the follow-ups quite equally. Slightly higher was only talk about the positives. That came in quite high at 16%, and then equal right after that at 8%. We're talk about the negatives, same routines, avoid places.
Okay. Yeah.
Skip it around.
Oh, now the positives and negatives are equal. So it definitely is relationship oriented. So
Yes.
avoid getting close to people, and then half the next one is too positive or too negative. So again, we're limited and we don't have the fullness of what's going on.
Yeah. And I'll just make a quick example of how it impacts relationships. This is just a great example. So imagine your life is a car and you have a trunk, and you've got all of this baggage in your trunk from this last relationship, and that relationship has ended, but you haven't cleared your trunk out yet of your car, and you're driving down the street to a new relationship, and you go into the driveway of that new relationship, but you've got all this stuff in the trunk from the last one. It doesn't belong there at that new house. It just doesn't belong there. But again, if you bring it there, you're not going to have a fully alive relationship with that person, that new person. So it's so important to, when you leave the driveway of the first person on the road, go on the road to completion, and then pull into the new driveway of the new relationship for a fresh start.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rob said earlier, experiencing the full range of emotions or the full range of experiences that we're talking about here with completion is part of living fully alive.
Yes.
Yeah, you spoke it out very nicely. Thank you, Rob, for that. Resentment can keep us stuck, he continues, over-engaging, STERBing, instead of engaging fully in the ongoing story.
Yeah.
Well spoken.
Yeah.
And then Cheryl says, stuck down or stand up. It's always a choice. I like that picture. That's like the whole perspective. Stuck down or standing up. There is a choice for us.
Yeah. All right. So now we get to talk about how do we express these feelings out. And I love the picture here of, imagine standing at an aquarium. I don't know if you've got those in your city, but we have a beautiful aquarium here, and I could walk up to the window and see the fish swimming by, And so in the present moment, what we want to do is process each one of our feelings as we have it, as if standing at this aquarium window. And so, first of all, a beautiful school of fish swim by, and oh, that's beautiful, that's wonderful. I just feel so just uplifted by seeing that. And then a moment later, you can see a shark in the upper left-hand corner there comes along and chomps down on some of the fish from that beautiful school that just floated by. And it's like, that was terrifying. I'm shocked. That was horrible. I feel awful. It just does not feel good. And I'm saying it, I'm expressing it as it happens. And then a beautiful seahorse floats by, and I'm now free to enjoy the beauty of the seahorse because I've been able to express the shock of the shark. I've been able to express it out and tell that shark goodbye, and I'm now free to enjoy the seahorse. So all of this to say, the feeling is expressed by expressing it. Saying it out loud.
This is so powerful, Kim. I love that saying. The feeling is expressed by expressing it.
Yeah.
So simple and yet quite complicated at the same time.
Yeah. Yes, it is. That's why we have our handy dandy feelings wheel. It's back, the feelings wheel. Because sometimes it's hard to find the words to describe how we're feeling. I keep this in the front of my journal because I want to have the full range of words to identify what this is feeling like in my body.
And I want to just pop that open. It's open now. If you didn't grab that last week, or if you weren't here last week, we want you to have this tool. And Kim, how can we use that right now, that tool, even feelings? Is there some way we can express those feelings that we need to express by expressing it, like we're in our fishbowl?
Yeah, if you're in the midst right now of feeling a couple of different things, or however you're feeling now, this is an opportunity in the chat to share how you're feeling. And you've got lots of hearts with ears that will be here with you in that, and honor and respect you in that, and support you.
Yeah, so let's do that now. If you see on that wheel, or maybe there's a different emotion that's not on the wheel, we encourage you to just be vulnerable with us in our safe community.
Yeah.
And just go ahead and type that in. What are some emotions you are currently feeling today, this week?
I also just wanted to say to people, last week some people had a hard time downloading the file. If you go all the way over to the side, there's an arrow. You push that arrow, it'll pop open the file, and then you just hit download, and it'll download directly on. It doesn't just pop up on your screen. You have to go over and hit that little arrow that's to the right. Then it'll pop it up, and then you hit download. It'll jump over and download, and then you can jump right back on. That's
okay, thank you for that.
I'm learning these things as we go.
Okay, so Kim's putting it out there. Joyful, energized, curious. Megan says apathetic, distant, skeptical, discouraged.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, Megan, I also just want to say thank you. In the Fully Alive Revolution, you've been writing laments.
Oh.
So a number of weeks ago, you decided that's what you were going to do as your creative expression during this time. And you have put words. It's like a modern day Psalms for us.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
When you're feeling those feelings, even expressing it out there is beneficial to us.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Anybody else? You want to write that in there? Melanie, she says discouraged, overwhelmed, frustrated. Yes.
I hear you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
I love your neutral responses, Kim, and that's really a pattern that we can have when we're a listening ear as well. I hear you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We're not saying that's good. We're not saying that's bad. We're just putting it out there.
I just view that this is just a very sacred, as if we are going to be a helper and a heart with ears, it's a very sacred calling.
Mhm.
And we just really want people, I want each of you to know that I do. It is a privilege to be here in this conversation with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stephen says scared, confused, bewildered. Alice says sad, lost, confused, empty, helpless, mixed with innovative, excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stupid is another one that came up with Irene.
Mm. Mm.
And Dan is posing as Susie over in the chat space today. But we are one. He asks, what colors would you attach to those feelings if you were painting them? On this wheel, there are colors associated with the chart, but that might not be your particular colors. Sometimes we can only choose a color or express with a color.
Right.
And a lot of art therapy, when dealing with grief, has to do with painting or coloring or putting colors or shapes down as a way of processing as well when we don't have the words to actually journal it out.
That's right. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, as I took the steps of grief recovery and my story unfolded in that process, I was able to draw out my story, and I could do that in any way I wanted to, like you're describing. And that, the creativity definitely comes into the expression of all of this.
Yeah.
Like that lament, that beautiful lament.
Yeah. So Rob says disappointed, discouraged, lost, overwhelmed. Irene says freedom, relief. Hannah, discouraged, distant, bored, irritated.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Irene says skeptical, irritated, sarcastic, frustrated, hostile, crucial.
Yeah, I hear that.
Cynical, guarded. So honest. Thank you for being able to pour these words out, these expressions in such a safe place here.
Yes. Yes. I hope I am hearing each of one of you deep in my heart, and I hope that you can sense somehow through this internet connection that you have been heard. That is so important.
Yes.
I hear you.
Katie says here in France, confinement is easing off and we're allowed to go more places more widely, but I actually feel more discouraged by this rather than excited because I haven't had time to really adjust to living here in France. So being allowed to go out and meet with friends is a reminder that I don't have friends or really belong here yet. So I'm feeling discouraged, unmotivated, also guilty for not being relieved for this change that's good for other people.
Yeah. 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 And I'm here again to remind you that your feelings are natural and normal in a time of transition and change. And it sounds like we're all experiencing that with the pandemic for sure. But then our lives didn't stop during the pandemic. Changes, moves. And so what you're feeling is normal and natural.
Yeah, that's good. I think sometimes we are just almost discouraged from having those honest feelings. Those, if we say it, we'll get someone who simply comes up and says, well, just put on a smile or just make it better or just quote a verse. Where these are deep things. And I think sometimes those good things sometimes just press it down into a deeper STERB. And I think we are not that vulnerable because we're afraid we're almost going to get in trouble for it. And so it goes deeper and deeper, especially in the realms, I think, of faith, that especially faith that is all built on information. That if you have the right information, everything will be right. Where we can have all the right information, we can have all the right scriptures, we can have all the right songs, and yet still feel this loss, this fear. And too often the goal is, well, let's just get you better, rather than how do we actually take this journey? How do we actually work to remove the hamster wheel from your house rather than, so I love these things. Inside it's so disturbed. Well, what do we need to say to this person? But
Yeah.
I think the thing I would say is just live. Just live, because we have to live through it.
Yeah.
If we skip it, we're not living.
Right. If we ignore all these emotions that have been expressed, then we are not experiencing the full range of emotions. If we only will settle for the happy emotions on this feelings wheel, then we don't have the full range of emotions. Yeah.
I remember, this is a story going back to my childhood, but I remember times where my perfect parents were not so perfect. And I remember the discussions that would come from that, which were so healthy, because they would be wrapped up in these emotions. And just like all of us do, and yet they wouldn't bury it. They would come and say, I'm sorry I did that. There was this openness in our house that I should have done that. And it wasn't buried. It was actually, let's uncover this. And I think that's one thing that really helped me, even though now sometimes, it's like, I want to bury these things. I can remember the example that my mom and dad had of, okay, let's back up. I admit that was not right. And I think sometimes we're so afraid to not be perfect.
Yeah.
And I think our imperfections, some of the most best diamonds in the world have those incredible imperfections in them. And they're embraced rather than shunned. So it's just part of my journey. I know my mom and dad, or at least my mom's on. Thank you very much for that. Because I oftentimes think about, I just have so many memories of let's talk about this. And I think in our world, whether you're in France sitting, a little bit, what am I doing in this country? Or Megan, as you move to a place and several of where you're at, we have to have those people in our life that we can sit down and just say, I'm stuck on this wheel. And so that's what I'm hearing today. I love these comments coming out.
Yeah. So stuck down or stand up, the feelings are expressed as we express it. And I love that we're doing this right now. This is very powerful.
Yes,
this is our community of other beings, even though we're on another side of a screen, we're in a chat space. We are in the process of being. And Dale said it nicely. We must give ourselves permission to feel and experience our feelings and emotions. This is the gateway to being.
We've come past our 60 minutes. We're at an hour and 12 minutes. I just want to tell you a little bit of where this is going to go next week. We're still going to go backstage here in a little bit. But next week, we're going to look at unpacking transitions. That sometimes we get it all packed up. Today, we're looking at the STERBs. But next week, we're not going to just focus on the grief and the STERBs, but how do we unpack this stuff to move forward? When we came off the ship, wow, the bags were fully packed. And we had to have people help us unload that. We had art therapy. We had a lot of different things. We're going to share some of those tools next week with you, both for you and for other people, to see how we can help other people unpack, because transition is part of life. I watched a video yesterday, just how even Disney World is trying to transition into what they expect to be the new normal. They're spending millions of dollars on this, and we need to spend a lot of time for ourselves. How do we unpack the transition that we're all going to go through?
Yeah, so we're in the midst of emotions, and Megan just says, I love that we're able to express this, and Kim's acknowledging it. It's not trying to throw Bible verses on this, even though that is our foundation and we can trust God in the middle of it. We want to trust, but we want to know what we're trusting God with. And I think that's one of the beauties of this moment, is going down really deep last week and this week, understanding what grief is and having good grief, so that we're not just like throwing a blanket over what we don't even know is, like a ghost, or like our small child Dakota playing under a blanket. There's something there, but we can't exactly see what it is. So we take the blanket off, or we unpack this which is where we're going next week. And we're able to see what's going on and identifying and journaling and art therapy. And we're talking about talking to somebody who's a big heart with two ears. So important. And Kim, so amazing that you were able to take us this far. This is just like cracking open just the egg. We haven't even been able to look at the chicken inside the egg in such detail yet, but it gives us such a foundation for dealing with these things that are so true to many of us in this season of life.
I think what this is doing is giving us permission. Yeah. Giving us permission to crack the egg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Did you have another slide to wrap up this section, or do we want to go into backstage in a moment?
There is one more slide, but we can make it part of backstage.
Okay.
We can do it that way. People need to drop off. We can go ahead and go to it just if people want to get a look at it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so thank you for those of you who just really had this window of time, an hour. Thank you so much. Again, I just want to remind you that this replay will be up probably by this evening or tomorrow. It takes some time to go through all the systems, but this replay will be up and you will be able to see this replay with the same link that you registered with today, or we will also put it up on YouTube, on our Duzie Potter YouTube. And Dan, maybe you can put that in the chat, put where our YouTube is. YouTube Duzie space Potter is where you can find this resource and many other resources. And so again, we want to thank you, Kim, for taking us through Good Grief STERBs, which once again have been just a discussion on who, what, when, where, why, and tips for those of us who are in the midst of trying to have good grief and identifying our short-term energy relieving behaviors and what to do with them. And you've given us great paintbrushes and not just a screwdriver for painting our walls. And the whole concept of completion and the full range has been very, very powerful. So some of you are going to head off, and that's fine. But for those of you who want to stay, Kim has a bonus that she's going to walk us through, 10 ways to cope with isolation. And we're going to have time to have question and answers and chat through that right now as well.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure I had seen everyone's expression of emotion. I was going through the chat just to make sure that everyone had been seen and heard.
Yes, and we'll take time and pray through this afterwards as well to pray for you. So thank you so much for identifying and acknowledging where you're at right now in this season.
Yeah. Okay.
So as you've just read through them, do you want to just acknowledge those out loud, Kim?
I think there's probably too many for me to acknowledge out loud, but I just see I see just the whole range of emotions, and I really do thank you for being vulnerable and sharing today. It just is really a blessing, and I just remind you again that you're made in the image of a God who expresses the full range of emotions. Yes. You are made in his image, and again, he brought all of his disappointment and grief to completion on the cross in Christ when Jesus said, "It is finished." So there is no condemnation in grieving and expressing your emotion. This is part of our design, and I hope, if nothing else, you get that you have permission to express this and to grieve.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes. Thank you so much. So, dun 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 dun. We don't have any transition music into the backstage, do we? But I think this is now officially backstage.
Yeah.
And Kim, you can just carry on with what you're on, or give us our 10 ways bonus.
We are moving into a blog from the Grief Recovery Method website. The 10 ways to deal with isolation during quarantine, during coronavirus. But I just wanted to touch quickly on this slide about thinking about meaning, connection, and we've talked about it all through this our time together today. So we want to just be fully alive in the present moment without fear and with love. And we want our support bar to be higher than our stress or our grief bar. So whatever stress we're experiencing or loss or mixed emotions, we want our support to be higher. And in the backstage blog, we'll talk about ways to do that. And just a reminder to pour comfort in toward the griever if you're a helper, and to debrief or dump out. Take your own grief and your own mixed emotions away from the griever. Pour the comfort in, that's this ring theory picture, and then debrief out. Even if you've been helping someone and had a hard conversation, to go to your safe person without betraying confidence and say, I had a hard conversation today, it really affected me, and I just need someone to know that. So just wanted to touch on that. But yeah, let's move forward to our, I wanted to share this podcast. This is another grief recovery specialist who's interviewing trainers from the Grief Institute. So this was an online podcast I wanted to share with folks who might still be on. I don't know if you want to take a screenshot of that. Give you just a second. Okay. All right, I'm ready when you are. People have had a chance. Okay, so again, on the Grief Recovery Method website, there are blogs, and there are several blogs about grieving through change in the coronavirus season. So I just wanted to highlight that page there. There are several blogs written about this, but we're going to hone in on just one particular blog. So we can move to the next slide. 10 helpful ways to deal with feelings of isolation due to coronavirus. And so this is just literally what it says. They're just throwing out 10 ideas for us. And I have a feeling some of us are already doing some of these, and we're actually doing one now. But we want to remember there's nothing wrong with you. Grief can be lonely and isolating on its own. So even though the whole world is experiencing this COVID-19 pandemic, you're very much unique in how it impacts you. How you feel is never the same as someone else, and your feelings are normal. So again, we're just kind of normalizing the grief that's happening in this big time of change, and you're normal. So next is an encouragement to participate. So the antidote to emotional and physical isolation is participation. The idea that we need to grieve alone is a myth. We learned that last week. You don't have to grieve alone.
That's good.
So first, we're going to practice shifting what you believe about communicating your sad and painful thoughts. And I highlighted this line. It's so important. And we've just kind of talked about this. Know that you should talk about your sad and painful thoughts just as you would your happy or positive thoughts. Yeah, find ways to engage with other people. And we're doing that today.
Yes.
Number 3, video chat. I'm so grateful that during this pandemic, we do live in a time where we have technology that we can connect through video chat. And you all might have a favorite video chat service. And I'm hoping that you're using that to meet with others based on common interests, whether it's a Bible study, a book club, trivia night. My sister and her husband met with another couple and had just like a social hour, just chatting as if they were sitting around a table. And the fun thing is you can connect with people that are geographically far away, and maybe have time to do that where you wouldn't have before. Number 4, hop on the phone. Sometimes with all of these video opportunities we have or social media, we forget we can actually make a phone call. So just to hear someone's voice and to encourage them. It's just kind of a deeper level of connection than just texting or emailing. Another possibility is read the Grief Recovery Handbook. that is available through the Grief Recovery Method website, or you could probably find it on Amazon, maybe a used copy. And it's just got really great tools in there, especially to help you, like what Dan and Susie will be talking about next week, to start transitioning and completing your grief and toward recovery. So that's our first 5 tips. Any thoughts or feedback on those?
Previous. I'd just like to jump in and say that it's so important. Video chats. I've talked to a number of people that are just, they have to work, their business, everything is video chat. And they're finding number 4, that just hearing a familiar voice and to be able to multitask and to hang out with people even audibly, somebody who really is that caring heart, and just doing normal life together.
Mm-hmm.
What is the app? I can't think of the name of it here. I can see it right here. And it is, what is the party one? House Party. House Party has just gone viral because it is a video chat place where you can hang, people are there, and if you just need to hop on in there, you can go there and have a chat, or they also have games. So if you just need together, whoever's in the chat can play trivia games or different types of games. There's 4 games in there that I've hopped on there with friends and family members. So I think finding creative ways not to be isolated while you're isolated, and you've just described those out nicely.
Mm-hmm. All right. And number 6, don't intellectualize. Grief is emotional, not logical or intellectual. So for these regulations of sheltering in place and social distancing, of course we need to do that for our own safety and welfare where we're mandated, but it doesn't mean it's easy. So you don't have to explain away your feelings with intellectual truths, because if we do that, we could feel more isolated. We can just acknowledge this is truly an exceptional time, and we're going to feel mixed feelings. Number 7, this is what we've been talking about today. Avoid STERBs, the short-term energy relieving behaviors, activities that distract you from sad or painful feelings following a loss. And they work, but only short term, so you have to keep repeating them. Eventually they'll stop working. So again, just becoming aware, that's the first step. Just becoming aware, and then maybe acknowledging to a safe person that you are becoming aware. Okay. Number 8, check in with friends and family members. You could even set a time of day. I've know people who love to plan, and I have a planner that's become more of a journal, but they plan out, okay, on this day at this time I talk to this person in my family, and then I'm going to plan out on my calendar this person. So it's just, if you're a planner, and that might be a tip for you. Practice your present moment skills. This is number 9. When you find yourself going out of the moment, remember you can get back into the present. First, acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. Remember our aquarium window with the fish going by. Acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. And then try to focus on what's happening right in front of you. And that's where we can kind of start to think about, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel? What do I smell? What do I taste? Just getting in touch with our 5 senses to come back to the present moment. But really, it works best if you allow yourself to express your feelings as they arise. It's much harder if you try to ignore them or push them away. And then number 10, do an activity. Try cleaning. Organizing. They give all kinds of ideas. Exercising, cooking, doing crafts, teaching your dog a new trick. Hey, Dan and Susie, teaching your dog a new trick. Home improvements, gardening. Just the list could go on, and I'm sure there are plenty of websites with these kinds of ideas and fun activities for you. I'm enjoying kind of memory keeping during this time. And just kind of, again, I had, as part of my planner, it's become a journal and a memory keeping type of thing instead of planning out long range. And that's just been really fun for me to do. Just a good reflecting tool on my story. So just so many possibilities.
Oh, Kim, this is so good. I'm just going to pop back to the first 5 in case you need to look at them again. And thank you, Megan. You put the list of that podcast in there. But I just wonder, in the chat, what are some of the ways that Kim has just identified down the bottom? Here's our list. What things help you get through each day during these times? We'd love to hear from you right there in the chat. Or again, if you have any questions, comments, emotional outbursts, time to stick them in the chat, and we would love to stick around here for a while. We have time, and we would love to hear more of what's going on with you. And Kim, once again, we didn't do this today. You did last week, but how can people get a hold of you if they want to have further chats with you in particular?
You can find me on Facebook. My name, Kim Kukura, on Facebook. I also have Kim Kukura Grief Recovery Method Specialist Facebook page. And I can write my cell number in the chat. How about that?
What was your Facebook page? I was trying to write it. Kim Kukura. What was the
Grief Recovery Method Specialist.
There we go.
There goes my cell number.
That's a Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't mind if they get a hold of you in any of these methods. You're on WhatsApp for those internationals who need
That's right.
to get a hold of you with that cell number. Or thank you for making yourself available these last 2 weeks. And one of the things that we have talked together with for those of you who are interested, what the future is going to look like for us. Of course, next week is Duzie Live, Unpacking Transition.
Right.
But Kim and us have talked about, we know when things start to get back to normal, whatever normal is going to be, we're going to need some transition time, and we're going to need Kim to come back with her expertise in helping us in taking the next steps. You've helped us, I believe, last week and this week with the whole good grief, identifying. We've spent a lot of time identifying feelings, because that number 9 of the 10 helpful ways to deal with, number 1 is it's normal. Mm-hmm. And then number 9, you're talking about practice your present moment skills.
Yeah.
And I think that's so vitally important, as you have just described it out there, is first of all, we acknowledge our feelings. And that's why the feeling wheel is so important for us to at least identify and be real. And the second level of being real is to use our 5 senses and to notice what's really going on and reground ourselves into the present. And I think that tool, if we gather nothing else besides those tools, it's normal, it's happening to all of us, and yet in different ways.
Yeah.
And your unique experience is your unique experience.
Yeah. And
then what do we do with those feelings? We reground ourselves. That's what we can do. Mm-hmm. And then we reach out to those people around us with the big hearts and the big ears. Yeah. And for those of us who are showing up for others, we show up and we pour the comfort in, and we draw out of them. We debrief, help them talk about, and we give them safe, neutral responses like Kim, you demonstrated for us. I hear you. Thank you for sharing this. You are safe here.
Yeah.
I acknowledge you as a person. And that's been such valuable paintbrush tool to paint our wall in this season of good grief.
See, I think one of the things I've really learned is you have given us the paintbrush, but we also need to invite friends into the space to paint with us. Paint in this house. We needed the paintbrushes, but we filled the house with people. We had people in every single room.
Yes,
painting.
thank you for painting
And
our
so
space.
I think this whole good grieving, the STERBs, everything, it's not a solo sport. This is a team.
That's
we
right.
Make sure we have that team, whether it's right with you or online. I think all of us here, we're available to you who are watching. If you can't find someone to help you paint, contact us, because that, I think it takes a community to move through this crisis.
Does.
Yes, Dan and I are also, Kim put her contact details. I think all of you know how to get a hold of us. If nothing else, it's our connect@duzie.com or social media, any of the ways that you need to connect with us. Please just reach out. We would love to support you, walk with you, and journey with you if you also have no one else or you need an extra layer.
And we're going to go round 2 on this, the same thing, but totally different at 2 o'clock. So if you want a second view, they're never the same. Someone asked me, why do I put both the morning and the afternoon up on the YouTube channel? Because they're totally different. Totally different. So we invite you to come back at 2 o'clock and join us as well.
And why are they different? It's because you are here. So we want to especially thank those of you who have been here for Duzie Live. You've been in the chat. You've been responding, especially the portion today where you poured out your feelings and your experiences, because most of you, when you wrote those things, I was like, yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. And I think you put words to some I probably wouldn't have chosen, but so vital for us.
Yeah. So I just want to bless you as you transition, because it takes courage. We've looked at courage, we've looked at creativity, we've looked at imagination, all that
Courageous
comes to
imagination,
this point where it takes courage to move forward.
Yeah.
We can get stuck. We can. I was just looking at my puppy, and he's sprawled out. He's done. We don't want that. We want to be able to, as soon as this is done, I'm going to go over and whistle. He's going to come up. We're going to go outside and take a walk. That's what we need to be ready to do.
He's not stuck down. He's going to stand up and go.
We need to move forward.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kim, for these
thank you.
2 different weeks. These sessions have been incredible.
Yes. And for those of you who have been on the chat here till the end, thank you. Wow, you are so valuable to us. And thank you for showing up for yourself and also for someone else. And if this has been of value to you, we encourage you to share with a handful of friends, 5-ish, and maybe even within 4 hours or 3.5 hours, I think is what we have left before the next one. If it's been of value to you and you can think of somebody who it would be of value to jump on live or to join us next week where we take it even further with unpacking transition. We would love for you to do that.
Kim, any last words from you?
I think I'll go with Nike. Just do it, feel it. But everything we've talked about, please just do it. Do it. If you feel alone, reach out. Do it. We're here, and we mean it.
Thank you. Well, God bless you all. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, God bless you. I loved what you said. Just do it, and then you changed it mid-sentence. I don't know if you subliminally did it. Just feel it. Just feel it.
Feel it.
Swoosh.
Swoosh. And share it.
And share it.
I've got 2 ears waiting.
Okay.
And a big heart.
Okay. We love and appreciate you. Alice, thank you. Stephen, thank you for making a way. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Direne. You guys are just pouring out the thanks. Rob, Illy, you've got sisters in hospice in Hungary. That's hard to be far away. We are praying for you. And reach out and grab somebody, even if it's me. Would love that.
All right. Well, God bless you all. Have a great day. Love life and see good days.
Thank you for joining us. Duzie Live, Good Grief, STERBs.
Bye.